All right, so The Rings of Power, new Lord of the Rings show from Amazon, comes out tonight on Amazon Prime all over the world. First two episodes come out. I've seen them. Posted my review yesterday. Clearly, based on early reviews, not everyone likes it as much as I did. Let me see. I think it's getting like 80 something percent. Let's go double check. Which isn't bad. 83%. 83% out of 124 critics. So it's fresh. It's most of the critics who have seen it like it, but it's not 100%. It's a tough call because there's obviously a lot of people care a lot about this legendarium, the Tolkien universe, the stories. They like when I was younger, I was a lot more, I guess, critical of adaptations. So I had a lot of complaints about the Peter Jackson films. And then now when I go back and watch them, I love them. I don't know if that's just age or just, starting, as you get older, you start to understand, hopefully you start to understand that like something like adapting The Lord of the Rings is not going to ever be perfect. There's going to be creative choices made by the people adapting it, by the directors and by the people writing the script, and by everyone involved. There's going to be these creative choices right down to casting that you may not like, but no one's ever going to be happy with everything. And here we have the appendices of the Silmarillion being adapted, which requires a great deal of creative license. There's just no way to adapt something like that into a TV show format without a bunch of changes. And you can disagree with the changes that have been made, but they have to be made. You literally, like, if you could theoretically adapt The Lord of the Rings almost word for word to screen. Theoretically, you could leave all the dialogue from that book intact. You could try to film every scene as it's described. You could do that. It would be a bizarre movie. I mean, you would probably have to make it a show, right? You'd probably have to make it an animated show. It would be very difficult to do, but you could theoretically do it. But adapting appendices to the Silmarillion, even adapting the Silmarillion, would be very difficult because it's just not a narrative-driven. These are not narrative-driven stories. They're histories. They span thousands of years. It's just a whole different ballgame. But what I really wanted to talk about was to go back to this idea that it's so horrible and such a betrayal of Tolkien and his intention, as an authorial intent, to include people of color in this series. Let me talk a bit about my evolution of thought on this. So, I, for a while, held this position that if you're going to adapt something like The Witcher or these historical, medieval fantasies, right, that are Eurocentric, based off of, The Witcher is based off of Eastern Europe, essentially. Lord of the Rings is like Northern Europe and England, and there's more. So if you're going to adapt these, you should try to have coherency in like racial composition. So if somebody is, so you have all these white people that come from the fictional England or whatever. If you're going to have black people, they should come from somewhere where black people come from, because this makes the story more coherent, and it allows you to be more immersed in it. It's more plausible, right? And that's true, but it also ends up really, really limiting how many people of color you can put into this fantasy. And again, a fantasy with orcs and dragons and goblins and trolls and elves and hobbits, all of which are fine, despite none of them being part of any European history. I mean, part of folklore, sure, but not part of European history, right? It's sort of... So when you think about it that way, when you think, okay, well, yes, it might make more sense to have some sort of coherent, like, oh, the people from this country are darker skinned, so that's how we're going to integrate darker skinned people into this fantasy. That might make more sense, but this again, why are we getting hung up on having like a dark skinned elf in a series where there are elves in the first place. You know? Now, see, I also take umbrage when people freak out and they're like, oh, there's no, there was that game Kingdom Come Deliverance that came out, which takes place in like 14th or 15th century Bohemia or Czechoslovakia or something, Eastern Europe. And there aren't black people in it. It's very, it's a historical game. It's not a fantasy. And there was all these op-eds written like, oh, there's no black people. Why are there? And I thought that's sort of silly. Like, who cares? Like, they're making a historical game about this small kingdom in the Middle Ages in Eastern Europe. Like, there weren't that many black people. I mean, they could have put some black people in there, fine, whatever. But like, the game is fine the way it is. We don't need diversity in everything, right? On the other hand, I can't really get on board with people who are so outraged when diversity is put into something. Again, I think that the developers of Kingdom Come Deliverance had every right to make their creative vision the way they wanted it. It was their game. They made a game about this kingdom in Eastern Europe before there was much immigration from elsewhere, and that was their creative choice, and I support that. I also support the showrunners of Amazon's Lord of the Rings of Power to say, you know what? This is $1 billion show. This is a fantasy for everyone. Sure, it comes from Tolkien's work, and he wrote about, he was writing from this particular framework, but now we're adapting it. We're making creative choices, and we're going to put some people of color in this. And we're not, this is not a story that deals with skin color. It just doesn't. The only racial tension you have is between elves and dwarves, essentially, right? And like orcs and everybody else. This is not a show that deals with the idea of minorities in the same way that some fantasies definitely do, and where that might actually make a difference. So I went from thinking, kind of seeing things more along those lines where I thought, yeah, we should have some coherency. If you're going to bring in, black hobbits, then there should be like a whole tribe of black hobbits. And that's why they come from over here. They come from a different area. And that's why they're black. And these hobbits in the Shire are white, because this is a medieval story. And there wasn't a lot of cross, immigration and all that back in the medieval times compared to now. And then I thought, why? What does it even matter? Like, who cares? I see these people getting so worked up in the comments of this YouTube channel and on my social media and on forums and elsewhere, so worked up about this. And people saying, well, it's Tolkien's vision was, this was Anglo-centric, it was based on Norse and Anglo myths and Saxon myths. And, he was building, and it's like, okay, fine. But who cares? Why does this matter so much to you? I can't figure out why it matters. Now, I don't consider myself woke. I certainly, again, I don't want to scold people for their creative visions, the way they want to, CD Projekt Red with The Witcher. There wasn't a lot of people of color in that either. And, it was a little jarring to see the Netflix adaptation have sort of, because you're used to one and then suddenly it's a different way. And it's a little jarring, like, wait, what? And then you think, okay, but who cares? It's a fantasy. And this just lets more people get involved in this fantasy. And then people say, oh, well, if they made an African fantasy, you sure wouldn't see any white people in that. It's like, well, maybe. Does it really matter that much? Again, like, if that's their creative vision, okay. And now, maybe it'll be like, Black Panther, which was essentially an African fantasy about a utopia in Africa. And there was white people in that movie. Quite a few of them, actually. I'm drinking decaf coffee. I just don't get why everyone's so outraged by this. I don't like heavy-handed political messaging or agenda-driven messaging in my TV shows either. Which is why when I reviewed She-Hulk, I talked about that. I talked about how the characterization of a lot of the men in that show was ridiculous. And it's not how you draw a strong female character. You don't need to make all the men around her look bad. That is sort of this agenda-driven, political-driven, woke, whatever, way of approaching strong female characters. I've seen the first two episodes of The Rings of Power, and I get no whiff of agenda. It is more diverse than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. If Peter Jackson made that today, he would definitely make his movies more diverse also, because that is the times. The times have changed. Expectations have changed. From a very pragmatic point of view, it would be fucking crazy for Amazon to make a show with virtually no diversity in it. It would be crazy. And what would it really achieve? How would that be a better show? To 90% of people who don't give a shit that there is a black elf or a black dwarf in this show. What I want is good actors. If they cast good actors, great. What I want is good stories. If they write good stories, great. If they include a diverse cast, I don't care. I still, and I've said this before, I still think diverse stories are the most important thing. So I hope we do get that African fantasy series. And I love that we have shows like Kingdom. I bring that one up all the time. I love all the Korean stuff that's come out. The Korean zombie stuff is great. And I love seeing, there's all this, there's all the Bollywood and Chinese film and TV, and there's a lot of diverse storytelling going on. I'm amazed at the representation that indigenous American people, like Native American people, are getting with shows like Reservation Dogs and Dark Winds. But I'm also glad that Native American people are showing up in largely white shows like Yellowstone or Resident Alien. I think it's good. I think diversity overall is good, and I just don't get the outrage. Again, heavy-handed messaging, bad. Diversity, that's good. It's not diminishing in any meaningful way the quality of the story or Tolkien's vision. I think like we have video games like Shadow of Mordor where you just go kill like thousands of orcs, and the whole point of the game is basically like to just fight and have like gain experience and learn cool moves, and like it's so far detached from anything like Tolkien at all, and yet it's a fun game. So who cares? I just really don't understand why people care so much. And I see this. You see people getting so worked up on the left, on the woke left. You see people getting so worked up and so angry, and they, it's something somebody said, or getting like a Dave Chappelle for the jokes he's told, or, and I say, well, jokes are supposed to be a little offensive. Like, we should have offensive shit. We should. Then you see people on the right saying, oh, this goes against Tolkien, this goes against the West, and it's like they miss the whole point of what Tolkien's actually saying. Tolkien's writing stories about friendship and perseverance and steadfastness and honor, nobility and courage. And it doesn't matter if people are black or white in these stories. And yes, back in the days of Middle Earth, I guess, everybody was white. But now we have in the UK and the United States, we have very multicultural societies. And if we want, we can still tell these older stories that by reflecting our world onto them. You can still have that spirit, that those themes, those values present. If in the next 6 episodes, it suddenly becomes this preachy, agenda-driven show that's just beating it over your head how bad it is to be white or a man, I will say so. I will criticize it. As a white man, I think there's plenty of problems with white people and men, but I find a lot of the criticism and the heavy-handedness of that, like the white fragility shit, very obnoxious. I don't want to see that in Lord of the Rings. I understand when people are a little defensive about that, but so far, in the first 2 episodes, I see none of that. I just see a diverse cast. I think you need to calm down. I think the problem with fandom right now is that people make up their minds before they've even seen something. They watch some videos from their favorite YouTubers and they just decide, hey, this is the way it is. This fucking show, it's so woke. We've never seen it. All we've seen is some trailers and some screenshots, and there's black people in it. So it must be fucking so woke. I'm not even going to watch it, but I'm going to talk about it. And these YouTubers are like, oh, it's the worst show ever, but I'm going to make 100 videos about it. Make bank all the way. I just wish everybody would chill the fuck out sometimes and just enjoy stuff. And look, I'm a critic, so I know I'm not going to just enjoy everything. I've been writing about The Walking Dead and its various spin-offs for years, so I know bad TV, and I can't just enjoy it. But at least give stuff a chance. You know, watch The Rings of Power. Make up your mind without all these biases, without your favorite YouTuber telling you what to think. Keep an open mind. Is it a good story? Are the actors, even if you think they should be white, but are the actors doing a good job? Is it a good story? Is the writing good? Is the music good? How about the special effect? This is how you interpret art. How does it make you feel? What is your experience? Not just like looking under every corner and for something that's woke. So anyways, I have rambled on long enough. It's late. I'm drinking decaf coffee tonight. I've been bothered by everything, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. So thank you for watching. Thank you for continuing watching. As you can see, I'm trying to make a video every single day. So please subscribe and like them and share them with your grandma. And I will see you on the flip side.